Welcome to The Nation. I'm Rachel Smalley. The government is promising to bring down the cost of building a home amid claims our construction prices are out of whack with the rest of the world. Property Council President Tony Sewell says gibboard, insulation and concrete are just some of the materials which are far more expensive here than in other countries. The government has released a discussion paper this weekend and the Housing and Commerce Ministers are planning to report back to Cabinet with their solutions later this year. Housing Minister Nick Smith is our guest this morning. Good morning, Mr Smith. Thanks for coming in this morning. It's cheaper to build a house in Australia than it is here, up to 30% cheaper. Why is that?
Well, we commissioned the Productivity Commission to do a real good kick of the tyres around that question. And they identified 5 areas in which the government is going to need to make progress if we're going to make houses more affordable. There's the critical issue of land supply. There's the issue of the infrastructure costs. There's the issue of the materials, the productivity of the sector, and there's also the 5th issue of compliance costs. Now, today we're announcing a formal inquiry starting with a public process into the issue of building costs. As your opening piece said, there's significant concern that items likes of bats, likes of jib, likes of concrete across the board are more expensive than what they are in Australia. We are a smaller market, but we don't see good reason for us not being able to be more competitive. And if we are going to make houses more affordable so that families get to live the dream of owning their own little bit of Kiwi paradise, then there are some of the tough questions that we need to ask, and we're going to do so through this process.
You're talking about things like steel, jib and concrete. That's Fletcher's, isn't it?
Well, the government doesn't have any particular view of any particular company. What we are saying is that the Productivity Commission report showed there's a real issue here. We need, in a very thorough way, not on the basis of rumour or speculation, on the basis of really good analysis and information, have a hard look at how the building materials market is working and to ensure that there are the competitive pressures that are there. Now, in terms of tariffs and those things, New Zealand has a pretty liberal regime for bringing products in. But are there other barriers? For instance, we have a body, Standards New Zealand, that sets the standard. And sometimes I'm concerned that the industry groups have too much influence over those standards that are then effectively adopted by councils and do not allow product from overseas to be able to give Kiwis real choice about those products. So they're the sorts of questions we're going to ask through this process. OK, if you can put your finger on it and say, well, actually, Fletcher's has cornered a huge part of this market. They do dominate so much of the supply industry. What can the government do about that? Well, of course, the government has the Commerce Commission, and its core role is to ensure that there is fair competition in markets. Now, this is not a inquiry that's orientated at trying to get a prosecution or something of that sort. It's really looking at what are the regulatory tools that the government has got at its fingertips that can try and get building materials costs more reasonable for the industry. We want to see a substantial lift in the building pace. We want to get the cost more affordable. The last generation, 25 years, we've seen a consistent drop in home ownership levels. In the city of Auckland, we're now down to 59% of homes being owned. If we're going to change that, this is one of the issues we need to tackle.
So, from what you know, though, from looking at the market, and you must have done this, obviously, it's your portfolio, do you think Fletcher's has got too big a share of the market?
Well, I want to be clear, I'm not going to be after any particular company. Yes, Fletcher's are a significant company in New Zealand, but across the board, I don't care whether it's the pipes, the PVC, whether it's the bats, it's the component parts that I want to be satisfied that New Zealand builders are able to get access to fair price. I also think we have to ask some questions around some of the businesses that go on in terms of rebates and discounts that go on within the industry.
There's a lot of that, isn't there?
Well, the thing that concerns me is, and let's look at some of the changes the government made in the financial markets area. There were real issues where you've got a financial advisor that says to somebody, please buy product A, and unbeknown to the consumer, there's actually a fee being paid to recommend a particular product. Now, in the building industry...
This could be placemakers.
Well, indeed. And so what happens is that you're the homeowner getting a house built by the small building company. He provides you with a bill for his labour and his materials, but unbeknown to you, the materials provider has provided a receipt for those costs, but is providing some sort of rebate back to that building company. Now, what we did in the financial markets area is create rules around disclosure. There is a question mark as to whether those sorts of disclosure rules should also apply in the building industry to try and get a better deal for the consumer.
That's it's not fraud, but it's not far from it. There's backhanders going on within the industry.
Well, the key thing is that it's perfectly proper for building companies to get discount for scale and for other things. What we're wanting to do with this inquiry is to try and give some scrutiny, kick the tyres pretty hard about where is there quite proper commercial behaviour and where are there things that are going on that are actually contrary to the national interest and the interests of the consumer.
OK, let's look at other issues around the housing market. How would you describe your relationship at the moment with the Auckland Council?
Well, we announced an accord yesterday that I think is a real breakthrough in making progress on house prices as in our biggest market. Fundamental problem, Auckland's population's growing where we need an extra 13,000 houses per year. For the last 4 years, we've only been building about 4,000. If you've got a market that's undersupplied, inevitably the price goes through the roof.
OK, let's look at the new homes that you're going to build. 39,000 in Auckland, as you mentioned, over the next 3 years. To accommodate those homes, you're going to extend the city's boundaries.
We're going to do both, and there's a lot of which the council and the government agrees. We agrees it's going to require a mix of both brownfields and greenfields. You've got to do both if you're going to be able to meet it.
You're moving on the greenfields faster, though, aren't you?
No, we're not actually. In fact, in the new mechanisms that we've announced about getting some pace, we have said this, Rachel, and it's quite important. That is, if you're doing low-rise developments, the 1, 2, 3 stories, the level of impact on neighbours and others is a lot less than if you're going to build a 20-storey. Yet at the moment, the process has it exactly as difficult in terms of the appeal process, the submissions, and, I'm advised by developers it can take 5 or 6 years to get these things approved. So one of the key parts of the accord is saying, actually, there should be some proportionality of process. If you're going to do a 20-storey, there needs to be more opportunity for appeals, a more drawn-out process. But for the low-rise development, we really do need to get some pace, both on greenfields and brownfields.
OK, so essentially you're moving the city outwards, which is initially what Len Brown didn't want. He said incentivising, intensifying the building more in the Auckland metro area.
No,
he favoured up more than out. But one of the issues I'd like to bring up with you is the commuting numbers. So we're building out in Hobsonville, we're building out in the outer areas of Auckland, and it's worth bearing in mind the country's workforce, about a quarter of it is employed within that Auckland, metro area.
Huge.
So let's look at some of the traffic numbers, because almost 30,000 every morning come into Auckland from the North Shore. 41,000 come in to the city from the south every morning, and 31,000 come in from the west, from the Waitakares. It's already a city that struggles to move people. Is that why intensifying housing within Auckland would be better than sprawling the city and putting more pressure on that infrastructure?
Well, the government has a strong view that it has to be a mix of both. There has to be brownfields developments, and in the new streamlining systems that we announced yesterday, they apply equally to the brownfields as they do to the greenfields. So it's going to be a mix of both. Anybody who simplistically thinks it can be just one or the other, with the population pressures...
I'm not sure that's what the Auckland Council suggested, though. And there is the question here, doesn't the Auckland Council know what's right for Auckland better than what central government does?
Well, what central government is saying to Auckland is, look, it's really in the national interest that we get more houses being built. We respect that it is your role to decide to what degree you grow up, to what degree you grow out, and where. But we do need you to make progress, and long protracted arguments that result in a stalemate, I tell you where that will take New Zealand, and it's very serious, is that if we don't make progress on that supply side of housing in Auckland, the continuing very high house price inflation, 12% in the last year, now up to 640,000, is inevitably going to see the Reserve Bank raise interest rates. That has a very bad impact across the nation. It is going to put pressure on the exchange rate, and we already know exporters are pressured there. And so for Auckland to say, actually, there's no interest by central government in this housing question is incorrect, and that is why we've been able to meet this very constructive accord.
I want to look at a little bit more about, central government's relationship with Auckland, because would that relationship change? Would you pull back a little bit if, for example, Maurice Williamson was Mayor of Auckland?
Well, look, it's a question for Auckland to decide who it's going to be its councillors and its mayor. The view I have taken as Housing Minister, and the Prime Minister, has a very constructive relationship and has been quite pivotal in being able to reach this housing accord. Len Brown is the democratically elected Mayor of Auckland. Until there's any change in that, we owe him the respect that office holds, and that has been shown in coming to this accord.
It would be easy, though, wouldn't it, if Mr Williamson was Mayor?
I'm not going to comment on that. That's a decision for the people of Auckland. All I can say is that I have a very constructive working relationship with Mayor Len Brown.
All right. We appreciate your time, Nick Smith. Thank you.